It's a hot afternoon at Jones Beach, New York. Summer, 1972. A man walks onto the sand, lays out a blanket a few feet from a total stranger, drops his bag, turns on a small portable radio, and heads off toward the boardwalk like he's got nowhere urgent to be. 90 seconds later, a second man walks up, looks around once, picks up the radio, walks off with it. The stranger on the next blanket is close enough to see the whole thing happen and does nothing. Here's the part that should bother you. That exact scene was staged, on purpose, over and over, by a researcher testing something specific. And most of the time, nobody moved. 4 times out of 20, someone actually got up to stop it. The other 16 times, people just watched a stranger's radio walk away in someone else's hands. If you're already building a story in your head about why, maybe they didn't want to get involved, maybe they figured it wasn't their problem, maybe they assumed someone else would deal with it. You're not wrong. That's most of what's happening. Nobody wants to be the one who overreacts, or gets it wrong, or ends up in a confrontation over a stranger's radio. So people do the easiest thing available, nothing. But here's where it gets strange. The researcher ran the exact same setup again. Same beach, same radio, same thief. One thing was different. Before walking off this time, the radio's owner turned to the stranger next to him and asked one small favor. "Would you watch my things for a minute?" The stranger said sure. Then the owner walked away, and 30 seconds later, the same theft happened. Someone walked up, grabbed the radio, and started to leave. This time, 19 out of 20 people got up. Not just noticed, got up. Some of them chased the guy down the sand. Some of them physically grabbed the radio back out of his hands. One sentence. That's the entire difference between 4 people acting and 19. And it wasn't a fluke. The same researcher staged a second version of this in New York City at automat cafeterias. Different setting, different object, a suitcase instead of a radio, strangers at lunch instead of strangers on a beach. Same result. The people who'd made a small verbal promise beforehand were the ones who acted when it counted. So what actually happened in that 30 seconds? It wasn't that the stranger suddenly cared more about a radio. It's that saying yes out loud changed what doing nothing would mean. Before the promise, ignoring the theft cost the stranger nothing. It was somebody else's problem, somebody else's radio, somebody else's day going wrong. But once they'd said, sure, I'll watch it, doing nothing wasn't neutral anymore. It wasn't just failing to help a stranger. It was breaking a promise they'd made, out loud, to a real person, 30 seconds earlier. And most people will go to real lengths, chasing a stranger down a beach, for instance, to avoid becoming the kind of person who says one thing and does another. That single mechanic, the moment a stranger says yes out loud, turns out to be one of the more useful things in this entire field of research, because it's not locked to beaches or radios. It shows up anywhere you need someone to actually follow through instead of just meaning to. Take work. Most people don't ask for a commitment. They ask a question and accept a vague answer. Can you handle the invoices? Yeah, I'll get to it. That's not a commitment. That's a maybe with better manners. Ask instead for something specific and get an actual yes. Can you have the invoices sent by Friday? Yes. That small yes is doing the same job the watch my things did on the beach. It turns a task from something floating in the background into something the other person now has to actively break to ignore. Take personal goals. This is why saying a goal out loud to another person works better than keeping it to yourself. And it's not about accountability in some vague motivational poster sense. It's the exact same mechanism. The moment you tell a friend, I'm quitting this, or I'm starting that, you've created a version of yourself that friend is now watching. Quietly deciding something in your head costs nothing to abandon. Saying it out loud to someone who'll remember costs something to abandon. Take actual safety. If you're ever in public and need help, really need it, not hypothetically, the advice to point at one specific person and say, you, in the blue jacket, instead of shouting at a crowd, comes from this exact same place. A crowd can quietly agree that someone else will handle it. One named person, asked directly, has just made an implicit promise the second they meet your eyes. That's the same 30 seconds that happened on the beach, compressed into an instant. Take relationships, the couples who actually follow through on plans, the trip, the budget, the harder conversation, are rarely the ones who both silently hope the other person remembers. They're the ones who said it out loud to each other. I'll book it Thursday. I'll bring it up with them. Small, specific, spoken commitments made directly to a person who's listening. None of this is about being pushier or more demanding. It's the opposite. It's noticing that most of the trust we're missing from other people isn't actually missing. It's just never been asked for out loud. Because here's the uncomfortable version of what that beach experiment really found. It wasn't that 16 out of 20 people were selfish or cold or didn't care what happened to a stranger's radio. It's that they were never given a reason for it to be their responsibility. The second they were, almost all of them showed up. Most people don't refuse to help. They just never got asked to promise. So the next time you're hoping someone follows through, a coworker, a partner, a friend, even yourself, stop hoping. Ask for the yes, out loud. 30 seconds is apparently all it takes.